Hi, folks. Thinking Slow here. So, we've got a quick episode about some good news in the UK, or relatively good news, which we don't have that much of. So, it's worth celebrating a win, even if it's a small win. But this is a very stern letter that's been written by a group of pretty serious parliamentarians in the UK to a committee in Parliament complaining about the running of the MHRA, which is the medicines regulator in the UK, which is responsible for authorizing medicines, and that includes the vaccines. And it's also responsible for follow up, which is looking at the yellow cards. And that letter's been extremely critical of MHRA and the CEO of that organization, Raine. So I think that's kind of positive because the language they've used is very, very strong. And I think that could be a bit of encouragement for the groups who are also unhappy about the way that the vaccines were authorized. So this could be useful for anyone who's out there with a similar kind of fight. This was just released a few days ago, although it was sent at the end of 2023. They just released it now, and we'll look at a couple of the key points in that letter. The subjects it covers are the funding of the medical regulator MHRA, a little bit about the COVID vaccines, because a lot of this relates to structural problems that have been in place a long time before even the COVID vaccines came along. So this is not just about the approval of the vaccines and the follow-up for the vaccines. This is generally that this agency doesn't work properly. And then, as I read the letter, I was sort of going off to get the champagne out. But you also have to think more sensibly, long term, that these complaints and problems have been in place for quite a long time. So there won't be a quick solution to this, but at least this is something. So the key thing here is that the regulator is meant to balance, I guess, the interests of the big pharma industry with the consumer. And, their job has always been to make sure that products are safe, really. And as I said, to monitor the follow up, the yellow card system afterwards. And Raine came up with this weird sort of boast that they said in the letter, where the MHRA has been transitioned from a watchdog to the enabler. And they wrote here, does little to quell suspicions of conflicts and the implications for patient safety, and cannot be overlooked, which is exactly right, that this is part of the corporatization of the state, where the state starts to effectively be almost like a part of business and big pharma in this case. And therefore, the interests of the consumer that they're supposed to be protecting get pushed down into a second or third priority. And the letter has been very clear about that, and it hasn't minced any words really on that point. This is a link to the letter if you want to read it. So I'm not going to read all of it. Obviously, there's no point, but the full text is here, appgpandemic.org, and then you'll see the letter if you go to that site. Now, the other thing that they talk a lot about is the totally inadequate way that the yellow card follow-up system is being dealt with. I mean, it's really terrible. I think you should read it if you're interested. But there's been now almost 500,000 yellow card reports for COVID vaccines in the UK. That's the table. They've made it slightly more difficult now to actually put this together. You have to go across different pages. But I summarized this a couple of weeks ago. This will be a position somewhere in probably early January 2024, and the number is staggering at almost 500,000 reports. So if you look through the letter, there's not proper follow-up of this. And also what's highly critical in the letters is saying that this wasn't tracked properly, because they could have identified problems much earlier with AstraZeneca, as the other regulatory agencies did, which the MHRA did not do. And not only did they not identify those statistical anomalies, but when they did identify them, they dragged their heels even longer, and the stuff kept getting pushed out. So they're quite critical of that, which I think is kind of good news for the people who are concerned about these vaccines and the authorization process. So that at least is good that that's been acknowledged finally. Now, before getting super excited about this, I wanted to read. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but at the end, this is what it says. The conclusion in another paragraph of this letter is the closeness that has developed between regulators and companies has deprived the industry of rigorous quality control and audit. Now, that could have been part of that same letter from October 2023. The only problem is this refers to a report from 2005. So that's almost 20 years ago that this was written. And, this phrase, it could have been written yesterday, but it turns out that, this is actually whatever it was now, 19 years ago, they knew about this problem. And another thing from that parliamentary group in the letter, it does say a lot that various reports have been written and there's very little evidence of tangible improvements. So there's some window dressing, hand waving, but they note that there's been not substantive improvements in a lot of areas. So, this is the bit where maybe you put the champagne back and don't drink it just yet, because this is a long-standing problem, and there isn't a whole lot of sign that this is going to be dealt with. But at least it's been noted. So, again, it's a small win, but it's still a win. I asked also the question of how realistic is this? Is this just shuffling deck chairs, smoke and mirrors, usual political shenanigans without any intention of actually getting to a final result? Um, and I'm kind of pleased to say that a lot of the people in this group we kind of know about, and we've read quite a lot of stuff about how these parliamentary debates went. And you've got some good people here who, you have to really, well, based on their debating anyway, their contributions, like William Ragg was an important guy who opposed the vaccination of care home workers. I think Sir Graham Brady's been quite throughout this whole COVID mess a voice of reason and has been against state overreach. Christopher Chope has been against a lot of stuff right from the beginning. And the guy we wrote to and responded to us quite positively was Danny Kruger. So I don't think this is a just a smokescreen kind of charade. I think these people actually do want to fix things. And as I said, the wording of the letter is very stern. It's kind of almost non-parliamentary, which is good, I think, in this case. And this is mainly Conservative MPs, but there are SNP and Labour MPs and a unionist MP in here as well. So it would have had to been agreed cross parties. So that's kind of good that the strong wording stayed in and they were able to agree together on that strong wording. Now, the big problem, of course, is a lot of these guys will probably be gone by the end of 2024. And where does that leave this initiative? That's something I don't know. Uh, as I said, we had a good interaction with Danny Kruger, and he was one of the people that voted for care home worker vaccination. And he wrote back to us and said, look, I definitely regret doing that. And if it came around again, I wouldn't make that decision that same way. I would vote against it. So, I think this is genuine. We don't hold grudges ever, and especially not against people who put their hands up and say, look, that was a mistake and I wouldn't do it. So I do think this is a genuine effort to clean up the MHRA, which is very badly needed. And as I said, the acid test, though, is will you get to a result with this? Because there's been problems noted about the MHRA for the best part of 20 years. And, as I said, that text you can look at could be written yesterday, but it was 2005. So will this group be able to overcome those financial enticements offered by Big Pharma, and basically get the interests of the consumer, the user of these medicines, front and center where it should be? And that I'm a lot less confident with, because we've got this, I would say, you have to say it's corrupt revolving door, where obviously at some point in their careers in the regulator and government, some of these guys are going to be fishing for their next job in Big Pharma and pay packets. So that is, it stinks, to be honest. Van Tam is an obvious case. And, this has been an issue also identified a long time ago. But by Tom Jefferson, actually, in the British Medical Journal. So, what's the end result of this going to be? Particularly as a bunch of those people on that list won't be there. That I'm a lot less optimistic about. And, just finishing up, I think Lord Sumption said quite rightly that, the system will sort of degenerate slowly and imperceptibly because it's based on essentially morals and ethics, and you can't regulate your way to perfectly good behavior. It's just not possible. There's unwritten agreements, understandings, sort of unwritten codes of conduct. And once those start slipping away, an obvious one would be the revolving door policy. Probably back in the day, someone would have thought, well, that's actually not really playing the game by leaving here and going straight to a big pharma job. But people don't seem to care anymore. And or at least some people don't. Other people obviously do. But unfortunately, there's more people in government, I suspect, now who don't really care about playing with a straight bat and will take the money in the big pharma pay packet or the money in the NGO philanthropist organization or somewhere else. And that is the problem. And this is my personal view. It's not a group view, but it's, the decline of sort of the moral basis of the West, which is Christianity, has to contribute to that. And until this kind of hits rock bottom and then starts to recover, I'm afraid the system will not work that well. And I think, as I've said in other videos, the sort of realistic option for the near future for a lot of people is just to stand up on their individual rights and resist government overreach. So that's the only way to sort of compensate for the fact that the system isn't working and it's been corrupted in a sort of literal sense. Is to understand that and to say, well, actually, I'm not going to listen to the things you're telling me if you're overreaching your bounds of activity. And obviously, medical coercion, was a massive overreach, and we should just confidently turn around and say no, especially as you're not operating properly and honestly, then double, double, double no. So I think that was really it for this episode. We are struggling with funding. This is a short episode, so it didn't take that long, but other work takes a long, long time and actually does involve a bit of skill to dig up the right data, put everything together, and present it to you in a way where you can go yourselves and check it. And also to try and keep out any, too much bias. Obviously, we're biased towards being libertarians, but we're not biased in any other way. And there aren't so many sources of information that are not colored by the sort of left-right tricks and games, or influenced by any kind of outside funding. And the only way that works is if the viewers and subscribers, of which we've got very many, actually participate with us in the funding. And on Patreon, we've got a very lively community there. Patreon is more than just raising money. It's about actually being in a group that's trying to navigate these very choppy waters that we're heading into, where it's very difficult to get a good idea of what the truth really is. There's so many opinions out there, and the opinions that get amplified are not always the ones that are right. In fact, I could almost say with a reasonable degree of confidence that the opinions being amplified are being amplified for some kind of reason, not necessarily because they're true, but because they're pushing a particular angle or narrative. So without the funding and without the support, we can't go on. So please have a think about that. And as always, like to say, stay free, and let's celebrate a small win. Thanks. Bye.